image ever gotten stuck in your head? Like a certain scene in a movie, or a photograph in a magazine, or maybe a drawing in a book? I can think of a few images myself. One that popped right away into my mind when I asked myself this question is of a girl running down the middle of a street in Hiroshima, completely naked after the dropping of one of our nuclear bombs. Sometimes the image is what imprints. The image is what lasts, lingering for a lifetime even in our minds, and for many lifetimes in our collective consciousness. Images linger, even if it's only a cartoon. I saw a great cartoon this past week. It was a drawing of pencils, one on top of the other. The first pencil was just a regular pencil. The second pencil below the first was broken in two pieces. And then below the broken pencil, the two broken pieces had each been resharpened. So that instead of two broken pieces of trash, really, there were two pencils, each smaller than the first, but both, again, working pencils. The images I just described were drawn as a creative response to the violence in Paris last week. I'm guessing you're aware of what's been happening. Two young men shouting about their loyalty to Islam and ISIS, claiming to avenge the honor of the Prophet Muhammad, shot and killed several cartoonists and staff members at Charlie Hebdo, a political satirical weekly in France. And then on the same day, another man shot and killed 4 Parisians at a Jewish grocery store, people doing their shopping. So newspaper and online journalists are now engaged, and perhaps some of you are as well, in heated debates about the philosophy and practice of free speech. You might be asking and or answering questions like these. Do we ever go too far when expressing ourselves? When is it okay to put limits on freedom? Who should impose those limits, and why and when? The debates are intense, and rightly so, because certain freedoms are the foundation of our still experimental democracies. Freedoms like the right to speak one's dissenting opinion openly. Unitarians pride ourselves on using that freedom. The right to organize, assemble, and protest. The right to practice or not to practice the religion of our choice, another freedom that Unitarians loudly proclaim. These freedoms or rights are all expressed, in fact, in our First Amendment to the Constitution. They are number 1 in our country's Bill of Rights. It occurred to me that the debates in France are similar in some ways to the conversations we've been having in Tulsa since the multiple killings of unarmed black men by white police officers across our country. The conversations revolve around racism, religion, culture, and violence. Racism, religion, culture, and violence. The question I've landed on is, how do we preserve freedom and fight racism and religious bigotry? It's a worthy question. For my mom, who grew up in France and is there right now, the image imprinted in her brain and in her heart is this one. It's the image of a small, white French man practically tackling a large, black riot policeman wearing all his gear in order to hug and kiss him, all in order to communicate, "Thank you." Now, if you know something about French history and French politics, you know it's more normal. And by normal, I mean it happens on a regular basis in a way that would never be accepted in the United States. It's normal for French citizens to boo and hiss often when they see the police, especially when they see their more heavily helmeted and amply armed special riot police. But this past Sunday was different. This time, despite the enormous sign, and the sign was so big, I don't know if you saw these images, but 10 or more people were lined up in those wide Paris boulevards to carry this large sign that said, you read left to right, "We are not afraid." But despite the image, the people knew that, in fact, they were very afraid. We know that kind of fear here in Tulsa. We Tulsans who have the race riot or the race massacre of 1921 as a reminder of what happens when people choose hate over love, all in the name of justice. And so Parisians are afraid too. They're afraid of violence tearing apart their city and their country. They're afraid of violence spreading across the continent of Europe. Being afraid, and we all know fear, fear can lead us in two directions: to denial, despair, or defense, or to some combination of all three, denial, despair, and defense, and so on to hatred and violence. Or fear can lead us to curiosity, compassion, and awareness, or some combination of all three of curiosity, compassion, and awareness, and so on to love and nonviolence. Fear, not hate, is the enemy of love. And love, as you know, is our theme this month. It could be really our theme for a whole year, I've decided. It's one of those words a lot like God. We oversimplify it by how we use it. We say, "I love you," "I don't love you," "I hate you," to our family and friends, all in the span of one day, all in the span of a simple 24 hours. We say things like, at least I do, I don't know about you, "I love chocolate ice cream," "I hate vanilla," as if love and hate were ordinary feelings, which of course we know they aren't. They're extremely powerful feelings, often expressing undercover, suppressed, or repressed, deeply repressed longings. Love and hate, apparently opposing emotions, actually often express our longings for, ironically, the same things, like contact and connection, like intimacy and influence. Do you see how love and hate can lead to the same things, like meaning and motivation, like purpose and power? What we can't get one way, we'll try to get in other ways. When love fails us, and love fails us all at one point or another, we often hide our hurt, cover over our fear, for example, that we'll never be loved again, puff ourselves back up, often with a lot of hot air, and look for the rewards of love or hate wherever we can find them. For example, in the arms of an illicit lover, in the drumbeat of revolution, in the romance of self-sacrifice, in the passion of war, in the pursuit of power of one kind or another. It all depends on what's accessible, which means the pursuit of power takes many, many different shapes. For example, emotional shopping, excessive partying, overworking, putting other people down, often friends and family, those closest to us, abuse of drugs and alcohol or sex, all of which makes us feel powerful or cover over our feelings of impotence for a while until we crash again into our need to be loved. These violences, small and large, take and make the shape of our lives, just as love and fear play out on the world stage. But power is a poor substitute for love in any and every context. Injustice is love made visible. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught our country this truth. Justice is love made visible. This year marks 50 years since the nonviolent marches from Selma to Montgomery effectively forced President Johnson's hand and pushed him to sign the Voting Rights Act of 1964 into law. Dr. King's legacy, at least one piece of it, is his teaching that in the material world, just as in the spiritual world, wielding love as a weapon is more effective is more capable of killing hate, apathy, anger, greed, jealousy, pride, and even lust. Love is better at getting us what we want, and thus is actually more powerful than wielding actual weapons, which leads always and only to death and destruction. I wonder how many of you have seen the movie Selma yet. If you haven't seen it yet, you won't want to miss it. It will be a wonderful way to celebrate tomorrow after you join us for the parade. There are several images in the movie I can promise you won't forget. One is of the 4 little girls who were killed when a bomb blew up in their church on a Sunday morning in 1963 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You may also leave the movie feeling sick to your stomach at our country's history. I did. But I also left resolved to practice the radical kind of agape love that fueled Dr. King and his followers. Not the wimpy love of Hallmark cards or Hollywood romances, but the radical love preached by Jesus, who said, love your enemy. It kind of hurts the ears, at least my ears. It sounds way too hard. Love my enemy? Impossible. But Jesus didn't say so because he thought it was an easy thing to do, or because he thought it's a kind or right thing to do, or because he thought it's the moral or ethical thing to do. Somehow, 2,000 years ago, Jesus knew our ability to love our enemy, not to like them, because no one likes their enemy, but to love our enemy the way God loves them, to love them and want the best for them for their own sake, because they too are children of God, not to love or hate them in a fickle way because of what they will or won't do for us. He knew that our capacity to show that kind of love would be our collective salvation or our collective damnation, demise, or end. Fear and hate, or hope and love. We choose. You choose, I choose, each and every day. What Dr. King proved with his very life is that love like that, lived out loud, expressed in action, can melt even hearts made of stone. Which is what Gandhi had taught about nonviolent resistance. Gandhi, who freed a whole continent, a whole country, India, from British rule, using only nonviolent public marches and boycotts to change the laws of the land. Gandhi, who said, power is of 2 kinds. One is obtained by the fear of punishment, and the other by the arts of love. Even though Dr. King and his family, his friends, and his followers were mocked, insulted, threatened, and beaten, even though his home was bombed twice, he was almost fatally stabbed, his wife and children received death threats daily, still, neither he nor they resorted to violence. Dr. King was very proud of this fact, and he deserved to be proud. Because if any people could ever have been excused for using violence to free themselves from the tyranny and torture of systematic racism, the psychological degradation and spiritual oppression of slavery and racism, it would have been African Americans any time in the last 300 years. Can we be as proud? Can I say that I always, or even consistently, choose faith over fear? Can I say that every day I choose love over power? I wish I could, but I can't. Can you? Even when someone talks about you meanly behind your back? Even when you feel threatened or know you're about to lose the game? I know I don't all the time, and I also know I'm going to try harder this year. Do you remember my mother's image of gratitude overcoming fear and creating trust and love? The Frenchman hugging the policeman. The image from the demonstrations in Paris last Sunday, the images that I can't get out of my mind, the images that give me hope today, even as violence does spread across Europe. And even though my friend Jojo, who many of you know, Nicole's son, our Nicole's son, who told his mother that he was afraid to take out the trash, despite that kind of fear, and you need to know that this was after the killing of Trayvon Martin, who, if you remember, was killed by a civilian. Jojo's afraid because he's a big football player kind of guy, right? Who happens to also often wear a hoodie and shorts. And he's afraid of being killed just because of who he is in his own driveway. And still, I have hope because of these images from last Sunday. A French Muslim woman walking through the city with a sign that says, "I am Jewish, je suis juif." And the image of a Catholic man walking through Paris with a sign that says, "I'm a Muslim, je suis musulman." And a young black man walking with a sign that says, "I am a police officer, je suis police." And an African immigrant with a sign that says, "I am French, je suis français." And more, "I'm a cartoonist." And more, "I'm a terrorist." And another one, "I am Ahmed, the Muslim police officer who was shot and killed as I tried to keep the cartoonists at Charlie Hebdo safe and protected their right to make fun of my religion." This radical identification with people who are different than we are isn't naive or unrealistic. It isn't simply entertainment or self-indulgent liberalism. Actually, it's realism at its best. It's public, courageous action, determined to face fear and heal hate by overpowering them with love. Did you know that Dr. King himself considered becoming a Unitarian? His theology and his politics were sufficiently aligned with our movement to the point that he was tempted to leave the Black church. But he didn't for two reasons. First, he wasn't sure the Unitarians would be able to give him the support he needed for the long fight for civil rights, and he knew it would be a long fight. And second, he thought that the purer liberals among us underestimate the potential of good women and men to commit truly evil acts. That kind of naivete, he thought, was irresponsible, if not dangerous. My point is that marching with a message is not naive or new. It is, to the contrary, a tried and true positive response to the experience of injustice, hate, and violence. It is redemptive in itself in that it develops self-respect, and it's effective. Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi knew the triple evils of racism, poverty, and violence, and they knew them intimately, more intimately than most of us. They fought against their own fear with faith in the power of love to change hearts and minds. Gandhi often said that if cowardice is the only alternative to violence, it's better to fight. Dr. King put it this way: the nonviolent resistor, his mind and his emotions are always active, constantly seeking to persuade his opponent that he is wrong. The method is passive physically and strongly active spiritually. It's not passive resistance to evil, it's active, nonviolent resistance to evil. Which is why I will wear this hoodie, the controversial one, in the Martin Luther King Jr. parade tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Not because I'm a young black man or woman whose very life is at risk, not because of the color of my skin, or because I have any idea what it feels like to grow up with black or brown skin in America today, not because I have any idea what it feels like to be a police officer on the streets of a city where mentally ill and desperate citizens are allowed to carry weapons that are more powerful than my own, because I have no idea what that feels like, but because I'm inspired by the living acts of love I've witnessed in Paris. And because even as the officers of the law are rounding up Muslims all over Europe, even as Christian churches are burning in Muslim countries, even as Germans are gathering in Dresden to chant and yell about kicking out all the immigrants, especially the dark-skinned North African Muslim immigrants, out of their country. Because when fear and hate are spreading like a disease, we have to inoculate ourselves and each other with hope for the possibility of peace. We have to inoculate ourselves and each other with a radical kind of love, which is neither just the absence of a negative force, which is never just the absence of a negative force, but always is the presence of some positive force. Hatred is not about religion, and religion is not the source of violence. But hatred does fuel the triple evils of racism, poverty, and violence or militarism. Blaming Islam, as many are doing, would be a misunderstanding of the causes of violence. As Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said last week, when the Ku Klux Klan burns a cross in a black family's yard, Christians aren't required to explain how these aren't really Christian acts. Why should a Muslim have to? James Gilligan, well-known psychologist and expert on the causes of violence, claims it's a lack of respect and the intentional display in words and or actions of disrespect over time, which leads to or triggers repeated experiences of profound shame, and then lead an individual to desperately seek to regain a sense of self through violence. This theory applies to each and every one of us. It's not racism, sexism, or poverty that causes violence, but the fact that individuals exposed to intolerable levels and potentially self-destroying levels of shame from which they can't see any way out will feel they are left with no choice but violence. Blaming Islam or black men or poor people or the police are all superficial answers to the violence we experience and watch on TV every day in a complicated world of political maneuvering in which people are always seeking security and power and love. Religious scholar Karen Armstrong has just come out with a 1,000-page tome about the history of religious violence called Rivers of Blood. Her thesis, in far fewer words, is this: when people in the West dismiss violence as a backward byproduct of religion, they're being lazy and self-serving. They'll be difficult words for people in the humanist service. Blaming religion, she argues, allows Westerners to ignore the essential role that violence has played in the formation of our own societies and the essential role that our societies have played in seeding violence abroad. Read some psychology, and we could add and say, when people dismiss violence as a byproduct of poverty or racism, we avoid our responsibility and we choose ignorance, meaning we ignore the fundamental human need of all people everywhere for respect and autonomy. When respect is denied to whole categories of people by systematic ignorance, repression, omission, and oppression for reasons fundamental to our psychological and spiritual well-being, we, not they, we will each do, each in our own ways, whatever it takes to preserve our sense of self. We must love each other or perish. It's what Jesus, Mahatma Gandhi, and Dr. King knew and practiced and taught. We must love each other no matter what is said or drawn or done. Because to accept that certain things cannot be said is to accept that certain forms of power cannot be challenged. And if cartoonists are allowed to mock Islam, they should also be able to mock Judaism. There cannot be freedom for some and not for others. That kind of peace can't last because everyone needs respect and autonomy. In fact, you could define freedom with those two words. Freedom means giving and receiving respect and autonomy on three levels: the physical, psychological, and spiritual. Everybody needs respect and autonomy. Everybody needs to work. Everybody needs a way to take care of their basic needs and the needs of their children. Everybody needs control over their own body. The black man, the black woman, the white man, the white woman, the black police officer, the white police officer, the Asian architect, the Latino lawyer, the Jamaican judge, the Filipino frame shop owner, the Mexican massage therapist, the Muslim musician, the Palestinian plumber. Everybody requires respect and autonomy. If we don't change direction, meaning if we continue to insist we can favor some and ignore others, we may end up exactly where we're heading, toward a more violent world. But if you change things in one place, people will catch on in other places, Dr. King said. It's what we're about here at All Souls. Changing things in this one place, our hearts first, so that things can change in our lives, and then in our families, and then in our city, and then who knows how far it will spread. So I will wear this hoodie tomorrow in March in honor of Dr. King and in honor of all the lives that have been lost fighting for freedom. Because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I will be marching especially to honor the black lives that have been lost. And there have been far, far too many in this one country's lifetime. And I hope you'll come and listen to Marlon this evening at 6 o'clock at Boston Avenue Methodist Church to hear more about that. For far too many lives have been lost in the Middle Passage from Africa to enslavement, through the long days of slavery, in the interminable days of Jim Crow, and far too many lives are still being lost in our vast and quickly expanding, very profitable private prison enterprise called the New Jim Crow, which profits precisely from depriving men and women of respect and autonomy. And too many people are dying on the streets of our cities. So I'll wear this hoodie as a sign of radical love, in solidarity with my family in France, with the people of Paris, and with all the people of Tulsa, as a reminder that if we love hard and well enough, we can change the laws of this land and bend the arc of the universe just a little bit more toward justice. And I'll wear my NYPD cap as a sign of love and gratitude for police everywhere whose job it is to protect everyone. Because when legislators in Oklahoma are introducing bills that would make it illegal to wear a hoodie in public, which is happening now in Oklahoma, it's time to speak up and stand out. Laws like that aren't good for young men and women of color. They're not good for police officers. They're not good for any one of us. It's time to identify with each other across our differences and historical divisions. It's time to stand in solidarity with our friends and fellow members of color, our ministers, their children and their grandchildren, before somebody else is hurt or killed. So I truly hope you'll join us as we march tomorrow and honor Dr. King's legacy of nonviolent love. I hope you're willing to practice with me. I have a last exercise I'd like to invite you to do with me, for us to do together to help us prepare for tomorrow. I offer it as a way to practice feeling this agape kind of love, the love that Jesus lived, the love of radical identification with the other, here and now. Are you willing? Thank you. We're going to practice by speaking aloud the kinds of things the people of Paris were saying with their signs, and we're going to add some statements for our own context here. So you can repeat after me. I'll say them first, and please repeat after me, and I'll say them again with all of you. And it might be more powerful if you shut your eyes. So if you feel comfortable shutting your eyes, I'd encourage you to do so. So we're practicing agape love. Here we go. I'm gay. I'm gay. I'm straight. I'm straight. I'm a police officer. I'm a police officer. I'm French. I'm American. I'm German. I'm Jewish. I'm Muslim. I'm Christian. I'm an atheist. I'm white. I'm black. I'm brown. I have a mental illness. I'm disabled. I'm a terrorist. I'm Charlie Hebdo. Thank you. You might want to go home and practice in your mirror, because there might be more names for you to feel. You speaking these words is an image I'll hold inside of me forever. We will learn to love, or we will perish. We will learn to love each other, or we will perish together. So I implore you to sharpen your broken spirits and your broken pencils, because both James Bond and the state of New Hampshire have it wrong. It's not live and let die. It is, however, love or let die. We all need to speak up, stand up, and march on, because love is, agape love is, exactly what the world needs now. Amen.
Thanks for tuning in online. We are so pleased with all the different people who have been tuning in from all over the country and all over the world to our ministry and what we're doing at All Souls here in Tulsa. If you have a chance to send me an email or connect with me in some way, let me know what you're finding, why you tune in, and what you're getting out of it. I would love to hear from you. I'm always pleased when I get messages from different people who tell me all kinds of things about the impact of All Souls Tulsa's ministry on them and their lives and their families. And if you get a chance to make a gift to support this ministry, to become a partner, we would love to partner with you and have you be a friend of the church and somebody who is actually supporting us to create this congregation and the world that we're trying to create together. You can be a part of it, and every gift of every amount makes a difference. We really appreciate your support.